ingredients in here. Today we are going to make a Cajun chicken pasta with a small blackberry crisp. So let's start by getting our blackberry crisp going. We're going to make kind of the fruit base here, and then we're going to make our little crisp base. So I'm going to start by adding in about a tablespoon of butter to my Dutch oven here. And I'm going to turn on my back burner so it can start to melt. And then I've got about 2 cups of blackberries here. We're going to add them in here. So this is kind of my small batch. It's a little shy of 2 cups because we had a kiddo steal some blackberries out of it. But, you know, the 2 of those little 8-ounce kind of containers of it. Just give that a nice little stir. And then we are going to add in some fresh lemon juice. Cut my lemon. We don't need a whole lot. But I'm going to do half a lemon, which is about a tablespoon of juice. This is a nice and juicy one. And this is going to help make a little bit of that kind of sauce that the blackberries in, but kind of also keep their fresh little tart flavors. And then we are going to add in about a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And we will add some more cinnamon to our crisp topping. And so we've got a half a teaspoon of cinnamon and about a half a teaspoon of, not quite a half a teaspoon of salt, just a little shy of it. A couple good shakes here. And then we're going to add in a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we'll add in about between not quite a half a cup, but just shy of a half a cup of sugar. So a little more than a third, a little less than a half. We're going to sprinkle it over. We're going to let that kind of cook up while we make our crumb topping. Let's give it a good stir first. You can see my butter starting to melt. And I like to leave mine whole, but if you want them to kind of be more like juicy, you could cut them all in half, but I just find that takes up so much extra work. So I'm going to leave mine nice and whole. And then at the last end, we're going to sprinkle just a smidge of cornstarch over it so it can kind of help thicken up. Let's now make our crumb topping here. I've got 1 stick of butter melted, so a half a cup of melted butter. And then we are going to add in a half a cup of brown sugar. And you're going to want to make sure you pack your brown sugar down. So we've got our half a cup of brown sugar. And then I'm going to add in a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a half a teaspoon of salt. So actually, we'll do our cinnamon first. And this will give it that nice, more cinnamon flavor to it. So a half of each of these ingredients. We'll do a half a teaspoon of salt. And then a half a teaspoon of baking powder. And this baking powder is going to allow our crisp to kind of give it a little bit of a puff, a little bit more of a body to it, which is really lovely. We're going to mix this together. Then we'll add in our flour and our oats. But I always like to make sure I've got this mixed together so that it goes kind of equally into our flour. And I find mixing it with a fork does the best because it allows you to break up any clumps of sugar and really mixes it up well. Okay, let's grab our flour, our oats, and then our flour. I'm going to mix my oats in first, then my flour. We're going to do a half a cup of oats. I'm using old-fashioned oats, but quick oats could work well with this as well. I just would not use like the steel cut oats because that will give you a crunchier texture to it because they just don't soften up as well. So we got a half a cup of our oats in. Before I mix these in, I'm going to give my blackberries a little stir. You can see we're starting to make our little syrup out of that sugar in there and the natural juices in the lemon juice. Here we go. So let's coat these oats up with that cinnamon sugar mixture, and then we'll add the flour in. I'm going to start with about a half a cup of flour, and then I'm going to keep adding. I'm probably going to be end around 3/4 of a cup, but I really end at where my texture is on my kind of crumb. So we've got our oats mixed in here, and then we're going to start with a half a cup of all-purpose flour, and I will add up about a fourth more, but I add it in stages, not all at one time, just so it kind of mixes a little bit better. So here is our half a cup of our flour. Mix it in. And what I want is a nice kind of really thick crumb. I don't want it to be a paste, but more it starts to break apart, but I don't want it too floury either.
You have a request to go over the crumb again?
Yes. So I started out with a half a cup of melted butter. Then I added in a half a cup of brown sugar, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a half a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of baking powder. We mix all of those up. Then I added in a half a cup of old-fashioned oats. Mix those in until they were all coated. And now I'm adding in, it's going to be about 3/4 cup of flour by the time we're done with it. But I'm just adding it in bit by bit so that I can make a nice kind of loose crumb. So kind of you see how now I'm like mixing it and it's not holding together. It's taking out these kind of big chunks. That's kind of what we want as our crumb for this. Okay. I give my blackberries a little stir here. And then I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. And we are going to add just a smidge of cornstarch. Now, with a lot of my crisps, I don't add any cornstarch because this will thicken up. Blackberries have a lot of liquid in it, so it needs just a little bit more help. And I'm just going to do a light dusting over it. And just be careful not to get like any really big chunks in there. And it's going to be about between a half a teaspoon and a teaspoon. We're just going to sprinkle it over, and then I'm going to mix it up. And that will just kind of help it thicken up a little bit along with the base of our crumb. Here we go. But you can see it's going to be so lovely for our dessert tonight, or well, today at lunch. Beautiful. I'm going to turn off my back burner here. And I always do this in a Dutch oven because then I can pop this straight into the oven. So I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And we will be popping this in there. I'm going to add, I think this is good. Now I'm going to take this and we're going to sprinkle this and try to create a nice kind of layer over the top. I'm going to put this over here and just a nice kind of even layer on it. And what will happen is those juices are going to soak up into this crumb as well. But you'll have a nice kind of crispier top on it, but then you kind of have that kind of cakey base in the middle part for it. And we're just going to do one whole even coating over the top of this. And then we're going to pop this in the oven at 350. And it bakes for about 25-30 minutes. And then it'll be nice and delicious. This is always a hit in our house. I've done, I do it for everything. This year I decided to do a mango crisp with it, and it was so good. And then, of course, you got peach and apple, blueberry, all of the regulars. Okay. And give my hands a quick little rinse. And we're going to go pop this in the oven. So you just sprinkle it on top. Don't mix it. Don't stir it. Just let it fall on top. Those natural juices are going to suck up into it. And that will kind of give you your nice little crispy. I'm going to add that in there, and we're going to let it bake up. I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to do it for, I'll do it for 26 minutes. But between 25 and 30 minutes is about perfect because it's a smaller crisp. It's not as big. Okay, let's get this show on the road. I'm going to turn my water up here nice and high. And we are going to be making a Cajun chicken pasta today. Yesterday we used bacon or one of those days we use bacon. I'm going to use the rest of that bacon up in here. And then I'm going to cut up my chicken and we'll kind of saute it in there. But I'm going to snip it up. The bacon and the chicken, I think, just play really well with the Southwest flavors. And I think they just play really well together.
Yeah, does it go with ice cream or by itself?
You could do it either way. My kids will tell me that it has to be served with ice cream, but you can do it really either way. I think it's one of those ones where you could eat it by itself, but who doesn't love vanilla ice cream? I know I keep saying, oh, I'm like, oh, I need to make some ice cream this year. I haven't done that yet. We just got back from our big camping trip. And now I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, Mike. So poor Teddy, my 4-year-old, he's having surgery next week to have his tonsils and his adenoids out. So I'm like, oh, that might be a good week to start up on my ice cream making because he's only going to be able to have that for a while. But hopefully this will help with his sleep apnea and help him get a better night's rest. But it's a poor guy. It's one of like the roughest surgeries you can have. And it's a really long recovery. But I'm thinking, I'm like, he definitely deserves some homemade ice cream. I'm going to have to think about all the different foods I can make for him because they've got to be soft and cold too. Okay. Got my bacon in here. I'm going to turn on. We're going to let it start cooking up. And I'm actually going to be, since we're going to be making the pasta, I'm using this is my 6-quart saute pan, which will be great because when we add in our pasta and everything, it will build it up, but it gives me a nice kind of big surface to work with as well as having a nice lip. Okay, we're going to let that kind of cook up. Let's get our chicken prepped, seasoned, and we'll saute that off, and then we'll remove it out and let it sit while we do the rest of our ingredients. Okay, so I've got 2 big kind of chicken breasts here. I'm just going to cut off any bits of fat that I see because those will just be chewy and they won't be as nice. So just cut them off. And then I'm going to kind of fillet, which is cutting through. That way I'm dealing with a thinner cut of meat. And here, this guy is really fat, so he might actually get a triple fillet. Because when I'm making like chicken in a pasta or I don't like it to be super thick because it just doesn't cook up as nicely. Here we go. And then I'm just going to do thin kind of strips, and then we'll season them with some Worcestershire sauce, some Southwest Chipotle seasoning, onion powder, paprika, garlic salt, and then some Tony Chachere's, which has a little bit of a kick. But my kids told me, please don't make it too spicy today. So I'm going to keep it really mild. I don't like spicy food either, so I will happily oblige. I feel like Torrin brought up last time I made enchiladas, I added a lot of Chipotle seasoning to them, and they were delicious, but they had some heat to them. Okay, get these nice and thin. And I don't like to do super big chunks of chicken because I like to be able to sear them off fairly quickly. And that way they stay nice and moist and juicy versus if you make a bigger, thicker cut, you have to cook it longer in order to cook it all the way through so it's not raw. So I just stick with my kind of thin chunks to begin with. Okay, let's get my hands washed. Okay, my water is at a rapid boil over here. So we're going to put in our noodles. And you could do any really style noodle cut with this, but I do find the ones that are like that big in length are the best. We're going to add these in. I'm not going to use quite a full bag. There we go. We'll give this a nice stir. We're going to let them kind of cook up. There. I have to say I love the smell of bacon, and I am getting that right now. Okay. I'm going to kind of stir it around. I'm going to turn my temperature down to about a 5, so medium. And we're going to just let this cook off. I want this to kind of sweat out as much of its, grease as possible so that I can cook the chicken in it, and we'll just give it a really lovely flavor. But since I'm using a fairly large pan, I might need to add a little bit more. I'm going to do oil instead of butter because there's not enough fat in it to kind of crisp it up because the pan is so big. So I'm just going to add a little bit more, about a half a tablespoon. And that should give it enough oil so that my bacon doesn't constantly stick to the bottom of the pan. There we go. Okay, let's season this chicken up. I'm going to use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. This is the acidity in it from the vinegar is going to help keep that chicken nice and moist and juicy. About a tablespoon or so. Now, I'm not doing a super wet marinade because I want it to kind of sear up really nicely. So that's about all the liquid I'm going to add to it. We're going to do some onion powder. This will give a nice savory flavor to it. I'm going to use about a half a tablespoon, put a nice big kind of coating on it. And we're going to use some paprika, which will give this a nice reddish color to the dish, and it has a very mild savory flavor. And we're going to use about a half a tablespoon of that as well. And then our last two will be our Cajun kind of influences. So I've got Mrs. Dash's Southwest Chipotle. This has a little bit of heat to it. And so I'm not going to add too much. I'm going to do about a half a teaspoon. But it has some like red pepper flakes in it. But a nice sprinkle over. I think it gives it a little bit, but don't go too much on it because it's a little spicy. And then I'm going to add some Creole seasoning to this, Tony Chachere's. And this will season up and give our chicken a Cajun seasoning, which will go well with our pasta. And we're going to add about a teaspoon of this. And this also has a little bit of heat to it as well. And then last, we're going to add some garlic salt. We're going to add about a good shake over between a half a teaspoon and a teaspoon because the Tony Chachere's also has salt in it. So we don't want to put too much in. Now we've got our nice kind of chicken seasoned up. I'm going to give it a stir in just a second. But let's get my bacon kind of crisping up here. Now I'm going to grab myself a second pair of tongs so I can toss up my chicken here and make sure I get all of it kind of coated in these flavors. And this will do what I always say, it's not a true marinade, it's a quick marinade. It's a get the seasoning stuck on them so that they kind of sear up nicely. But you don't have to do a long wait on it. There we go. And then I'm just going to make sure we get all that good flavor. And then I'm starting to see my bacon. It's starting to sweat out nicely. And now this bacon is what I'm going to leave in this pan the whole time. So I'll be removing the chicken out, but the bacon will stay to continue seasoning and crisping up. There we go. So I'm going to push my bacon to the outer edges, and then we're going to put our chicken in to sear off, and then we'll be removing our chicken for our thing. Because if you leave the chicken in the whole time, it will dry out, and then it's just not as delicious. I'm going to spread it out so all the chicken kind of have its own space on my saute pan. And then we're going to prep our veggies for our pasta. There we go. Spread those out just a little bit more. And this way that chicken will get both that bacon flavor and will sear up nicely. Okay. We give our pasta a little stir here. There we go. And now let's start prepping our vegetables that will start cooking up. First, when it comes out, we're going to start with our yellow onion. I'm going to cut off the tops of it. We'll make a slit down the side, and we're going to just remove this whole top layer. That way, we don't have to worry about peeling it and getting off any of the bruised or over-ripened parts. And because I'm doing a shorter pasta, I'm going to do kind of a dice on these. I'm not going to have them too long with our onions because I kind of want them to blend. If you were doing a longer noodle like a spaghetti or a fettuccine or whatnot, you could do a long and skinny slice with them. But with shorter, you want to make sure your veggies aren't going to be longer than your pasta noodle. So we'll just do our kind of simple dice on here. And I also like the onions to kind of blend in more and not necessarily stand out quite as much. And then we have our pepper. So I'm just using one bell pepper. We're going to pull off this guy. Actually, technically, this is a female pepper because it has 4 prongs at the bottom, which usually means it's going to be seedier and sweeter. Pull these out, and I'm going to kind of do a larger dice on the peppers than my onions, about twice that size, because the peppers, I want them to stand out a bit more in this because they kind of lend itself with those more Cajun flavors. Now, I always cut my peppers from the inside versus the outside because the inside has a bit more grit on it, and it allows your knife a better grip, so you're less likely to slip and slide on it. I find for when I know my knife is dulled up, onions, peppers, and tomatoes are the 3 vegetables that really let me know, hey, you need to sharpen it up because that's when they'll slip and slide the most. I'm going to give this a rotate, and then
How many times or how often do you need to sharpen your knife?
I sharpen my knives probably 1 to 2 times a month, depending on how much I use them. I have had my knife since I got married, and so it's going on. I got it as a wedding present. I got it as a collection, 17 years, and it's still going really, really strong with it. I think so many people think they're either not comfortable sharpening their knives or they don't realize they need to do it, and then they think their knives go bad. And I said, your knife doesn't go bad. Unless you break the blade, your knife is good. It just needs to be sharpened up. Okay, I'm going to flip my chicken over here, which we're getting a nice kind of sear on it. Get this the other side. And then once we've got it kind of cooked through on the other side, we're going to pull the chicken off. And then put it here. But I will say I only sharpen it once when it's typically when I'm cutting tomatoes because they're the ones that I feel like have the trickiest of skin. And whenever it snags, I sharpen it up. And I have a honing steel, so my knife set, they're from Woostoff. I actually have them in my Amazon storefront because I love it. This is the Woostoff Classic Collection, and it comes with a honing steel. And it's really not that hard. It takes me like 30 seconds, and it's just like going like this against the honing steel. And it's really simple once you know how to do it. You actually kind of feel like you're like a swordsman, like a professional when you do it. I always think it's really fun. But a sharp knife makes all the difference in prepping and cooking. So I really do recommend keeping your knife sharp. You're more likely to cut yourself on a dull knife because a dull knife is when you're going to slip and slide, and that's when you're going to make a mistake and accidentally slide on an onion and nick your finger or whatnot. Okay, I'm going to turn this guy up just a little bit because I want to sear off this bottom side, and then we're going to remove this chicken out. I'm going to grab a plate. And we'll have it right here for it. And then I'm gonna slide my onions because we're gonna cook our onions up first for it to kind of sear them off. But these are looking just about. There's a few more bits in here. But the thing is, you could be tempted to leave your chicken in when you're making it, but you just don't want to. Because if you do, they are going to get overcooked, and that's when you're going to get a stiff, hard, dry chicken in your pasta. So just sear it off. Yes, it makes an extra dish, but it's going to be well worth it. You'll have a better end product. So these are looking just about ready on here. I'm checking each one, making sure it's kind of firm through. Again, we will also be adding these back into our sauce at the end, so they will continue to cook on top of that. But these, I think, are pretty good. So I'm going to try to take out my chicken as much as it is. It's okay if I get a little bit of bacon in there. That's fine. I want to leave some of that in there to continue to flavor up my next set of veggies and crisp up a little bit. So we're just going to spoon it out. And that way this chicken will stay nice and juicy and tender in our final product. It also allows your rest of your vegetables to cook up better as well because they'll have more surface area on the stove. And it will allow you, to heat them up and crisp them up nicely versus trying to do them in a more liquid environment with all that chicken in there. There we go. We got it. I think I have maybe one piece left. Okay. I've got some sun-dried tomatoes right here. I'm actually using the oil of the sun-dried tomato. We'll use that last one, but we're going to kind of cook in this oil with that. It will give a nice flavor. We're also going to be using some sun-dried tomato pesto, which just plays really well into those kind of Southwest flavors. I'm going to turn my skillet down to about a 5 now. We're going to add in our onions. We're going to let them saute first by themselves. I feel like onions are one of those vegetables that really need a moment by themselves in the pan before you start adding in other ingredients. Once you add other ingredients in, they don't crisp up as nicely. They don't get their caramelization in there. So they're the ones that need a minute to themselves for their best flavor to come out. Okay, we're gonna let those heat up. Once they're starting to become translucent and you can start to see through them, then I will know that it's ready to add my peppers in. I'm gonna check my pasta over here. We're gonna see how it is. And I think it still needs a little bit more, but yeah, still firm. We'll let it cook up some more. I'm always cook my pasta, especially if I'm putting it into a sauce, right at al dente. I try not to go any longer because the sauce that you're putting it in is going to soak up some more of those juices. And if you cook it past al dente, then it's going to be more of a soggy pasta. Okay. So we're almost there. We've still got a couple white ones. So kind of the difference between the onions is if they're still white, so you've got some still white ones right there, that is going to have more of an astringent, pungent onion flavor versus the ones, once you get them translucent, let me see if I can find a good translucent guy for you here. He's starting to see through him more. That is going to be the ones that have more of a mellow flavor to them. And like I said, with onions, they need a minute. Once you start adding other things in, it's a lot harder to cook out that kind of pungent flavor. Okay. I'll let those sit for about 30 seconds. While we're doing that, I'm going to prep up my zucchini to go in next. I feel like zucchini is a great vegetable that has a very mild flavor. It just soaks up whatever flavor you're using. And so I find that is just great in pastas because it just really matches your flavors, and it's just delicious. So we're gonna give it up. I'm quartered each one, and then I'm going to just do not a super thick, but a nice little, about a quarter of an inch chunk on these, because if you cut them too thin, what will happen is, because they're so delicate, they get really mushy. So they need enough of a thickness to keep their shape, but you also don't want to cut them too thick. But don't, if you cut them too thin, then they'll just kind of turn to mush in your pan. Same with yellow squash, and that's because they're just very delicate. They're like little flavor sponges, so they're going to soak up all those delicious flavors. Okay. Most of our onions are nice and starting to get translucent. So I'm going to throw in my peppers and let them saute up. There we go. And I kind of coat everything in that oil. And remember, that was a little bit of that sun-dried tomato oil as well as that bacon grease. So it's going to have a really delicious kind of savory flavor to it. And then I'll spread it out. There. And then I'm going to move these over. And the way I do my vegetables when I'm cooking is I do firmest to softest, or like least juicy to most juicy. So I'm going to add in my zucchini next. Then we'll add in our tomatoes. If you add in your tomatoes before, the juices will just going to leak out, and then you're not going to get a good sear on it. And then firmer vegetables need to go first because they need longer time to cook.
You have a question. How are your tomato plants doing?
I've got a bunch of green ones growing now, but I only have one that is ready to be picked. I give these a quick rinse. So they're coming. I'm hoping, because we've had a lot of rain, which is really good because I'm really bad at watering my plants, that they're going to be really great once we have a couple of days of nice sunshine. But it's funny because I look over at my neighbor's little garden, and she's got like hundreds of tomatoes over there. And I'm like planted these like 30 feet from you. Why are yours like blooming and mine are? Because she cares for them more. She gives them more love. She's out there every single day. And I'm like 4 days in, oh, it hasn't rained. Should we water them? And then I tell Evie, I'm like, Evie, go out and water my plants for me. And I don't know how good her watering skills are. But, I've got enough work keeping my 5 kids alive. And then my pets. I've got a lot of dogs and cats. Add in plants. It's funny. I have like this romantic idea in my head that I'm going to be this great gardener. And it has just never come to fruition. I had 1 year, 2020, year of COVID. That was the 1 year my garden was like amazing, because I had like nothing else to do. I was home and with the kids, and I like took so much care. It was wonderful, and I have never been able to recreate that. Okay, we've got our peppers in here. I'm going to add in my zucchini now. I'm going to turn up my heat to about a 6 now. I can see it's gotten a little cooler. And then I'm going to stir this around so that all of the zucchini kind of gets coated in that oil on both sides, and then we'll hopefully sear up nice. Zucchini is like a sponge, so it is going to soak up all of these delicious kind of flavors. There we go. They're all should be about coated in it. And then I'm going to spread it out nice and flat. Let's give our noodles a little stir. They actually are feeling, I can tell by when I stir them how they feel. If they're just like smooth and are running around, they typically tell me that they are about done. These are done. I'm going to turn off my water here. And I'm not using any of my stock or any of my starchy water in today's dish, so I'm just going to dump it all. And give it a couple good shakes. And then I'm just going to let it strain over here. I don't need to add any oil to it because we're going to be putting it into the sauce, and that sauce later will help it kind of separate. Okay, let's get these tomatoes chopped up. I'm doing kind of a simple dice on it. It's not too small, so not like salsa, but big enough or small enough to where you're not going to have a huge piece of tomato skin, because the rest of your tomato will reduce down, but the tomato skin is always still there. And if you didn't want to use fresh tomatoes, you could always use a jar, like a can of diced tomatoes. So we're just going to slice them here. And this is what I always say. Tomatoes are those ones where I know when my knife is dull, because if your knife is dull, it just will not cut a tomato well. You used to always think serrated knives are better for tomatoes because serrated knives always cut well through the skin. But if your knife is truly sharp, and well, it will cut through your tomato. Okay, let's go and check on our crisp. I hear it beeping. Well, it should be done, but we'll check to see if it needs a minute or two. This is a quick stir. Then we're going to head that way, because now we're kind of on the home stretch here. Let's look. It is looking pretty good. I'm going to give it a little touch. I'm going to let it sit for about 5 more minutes, and then it should be done, because I want it to have a little bit more of a crunch on it. And it really depends what fruit you're cooking. Oh, that's 5 hours. We don't want 5 hours. Because a juicier fruit is going to need a little bit longer, because it's going to have more liquid that it needs to bake off, versus some of your drier fruits will use a little bit less time, because there's not as much liquid that it needs to kind of absorb. But you want to make sure you cook it all the way through so it's not mushy. Like, you want it to have like a crisp top, but then that soft kind of middle. Okay, let's get these chopped up, and then we're going to add them in to our sauteed veggies here. And then we're going to do our spices, and then we're kind of on the home stretch with that. So probably about 5 minutes until everything is about done. Okay, just again, I'm going to slide these off in here. And with your vegetables, you don't want to overcook them, especially if they're fresh, because you want them to kind of keep their nice body and give you that more of that fresh summer vibe versus a more hearty stewed vegetables. So we've got our tomatoes. Now that natural liquid from the tomatoes are going to come out and help make a part of our sauce. I will be adding a little bit of cream to kind of give it that creamy Cajun texture. I think always helps kind of cut through that spiciness. I'm going to turn my pan up nice and hot. And while we're letting it saute, I'm going to get some of my tomato paste. I love my tomato paste in a tube versus like a can, because a can you have to use it right away. But now when you get to the bottom of it, you got to squeeze it out. And I'm going to just make a little kind of well in the middle here. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of tomato paste. This is going to just give a more of a rich tomato body to it. And then I have a little bit of tomato pesto and sun-dried tomato. And this is going to be for the base of our Cajun pasta. So sun-dried tomatoes have just a really strong tomato flavor. And I absolutely love them. And I think they play well with a Cajun pasta. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of our sun-dried tomato pesto. Now, you could always do more. I would say you could do up to 1/4 of a cup if you like it really strong in there. But I was running out. And then I have 2 sun-dried tomatoes here. So you can see we're getting a lot of sun-dried tomato flavors in our things, which have just a richer flavor than regular ones. I'm going to mince these 2 up to add that in there. because I want it to be subtle into the sauce. And then you have the fresh tomatoes as kind of the vegetable base. Here we go. I'm going to add that in there. And let's give this a nice stir. Let those kind of cook in. And then we're going to give it some seasonings. We have a little bit left over from the chicken in there, but we do need to give it a smidge more. So we're going to start with a little bit of paprika. We're going to do about like a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of paprika. And we'll use a smidge of onion powder as well. That's going to help flavor up the sauce. So you're about a half a teaspoon. And your same flavors on our chicken, we're just adding them now. We've got our Southwest Chipotle, just a little bit. I'm going to do really nice little shake over it, probably a fourth of a teaspoon because that has some red pepper in it and can get spicy. And then we've got our Tony Chachere's. We're going to do about a half a teaspoon. So a good shake here.
You have a question? Have you ever done blackberry dumplings?
I have never done blackberry dumplings, but that actually sounds like really interesting. You know, I have never actually tried that, but I feel like that could actually work really well. Here we go. So now I've got them kind of smell, and you can smell that nice kind of rich flavor to it. And now we're going to add in our chicken back in. And then I'm going to grab my cream. We're going to let this simmer for a second with a little bit of cream in there. And, well, we can grab my cream as we come back from the oven. It should be ready now. Okay, I hear ya. There we go. That looks better. You can see it's kind of puffed up out of the blackberry juices a little bit more. Got more of that bubble through. Means we've got a nice kind of thicker blackberry gel on the bottom. So I'm going to add this guy right up here. That's going to be so delicious. I feel like blackberry is just one of those delicious summertime meals. And it's, you can see, so we have our crisp that we made out of brown sugar, melted butter, oats, cinnamon, and a little bit of baking powder, which gives it a little body. And then we made our blackberry base using 2 cups of blackberries, fresh lemon juice, a little bit of butter, a little bit of cornstarch and cinnamon and salt. And together it's just going to have that nice kind of, I feel like that summer picnic cobbler feel to it. Okay. Got my chicken kind of stirred in here. And then we're going to add in some cream. You don't need a whole lot of cream to this. I'm going to start with about between a fourth of a cup and about a third of a cup because it's a pretty big pan here. And you just want enough to give a bit more body to the sauce in here. But I'm not having a really heavy sauce because I want it to be more or less of it, but barely coat the noodles so that everything else kind of stands out. And then we're going to pop in our noodles here, and then we're going to dress it off with a little bit of fresh green onion, and we will be ready to serve up. So I'm going to let this kind of soak in those flavors. But you can see it's not a super heavy sauce, but that cream just helps cut through some of that spiciness and allows those like flavors to really blend together. And then we're going to top it with some fresh green onions to kind of give you that really fresh onion flavor that I think pairs well with Cajun food. So I'm going to turn this down to a low. Here we go. And then I've got some green onions here. And we are just going to kind of mince up the top of these and add them in. Green onions, the green parts of the tips are best added in towards the very end of your cooking process so they keep their nice flavors and they don't, if you overcook them, you lose your onion flavor and then the greens just kind of get a little bit soggy. And they add that just really pretty pop of color. And Now we are ready to serve up. Let me grab, let's do, we've got this for our cobbler and this for our pasta. Okay. Let's slide this out of the way. So for lunch today, we've got our Cajun chicken pasta in a lovely kind of tomato cream sauce that we seasoned with some Tony's chaudry and some Southwest Chipotle flavors. We added in zucchini, fresh tomatoes, sun-dried tomatoes, green onions, peppers, regular onions, and all of those were kind of sauteed together with the flavors. There's bacon in there to give that richness, but it's got a nice like kick to it, but not being overwhelming, and kind of just, I think, perfect for like a summertime, like a Cajun themed meal. And then for our dessert, we've got our blackberry cobbler. So I'm going to scoop it up. You see how those blackberries have soaked, or that cobbler crumb has soaked up all of that blackberry juice into our cobbler. So it's just going to be delicious. You could eat it plain or with some whipped cream or a nice big scoop of ice cream for a delicious kind of dessert. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go and search for what we cook for. So Cajun chicken pasta, and then watch along with me and cook with me again at home. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront, which has all of our cooking gadgets in it. I have my pans, my knives, my cutting boards, all of that's in there if you're interested to see what products we use. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.